I'm a fan of books that have to do with stories about cults. And cults always mess up kids real bad. So today we're going to talk about a book called Where You End by Abbott Kahler. This book follows the story of two sisters, Kat and Jude. And while it doesn't directly say the story's about a cult, it is. So what happens is you come into the story and the two sisters, they were in a car accident and Kat ends up with I would say, traumatic brain injury that causes her to lose all her memories, and she remembers absolutely nothing. All she remembers is her identical twin sister, Jude. But everything else is gone. And so Jude basically has to rebuild her memories and kind of clue her in on what her life was, about their parents, about them, about growing up. But they had a pretty effed up childhood. So Jude kind of wants to save her sister from that and protect her and not have her relive the nightmare that was their childhood of growing up in a cult. And what it was called was The Plan, What You Think Is, or some saying like that. The girls grew up with their mother, Verona, and their father, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but their father was an inventor and just creative, and he at one point in time disappears. Verona, she's very like avant-garde and she sells antiques and she has this collection of people she hangs out with that are quite interesting. And together they all come up with this idea for this way of living called the Plan. And they decide that they're going to take all the kids around them of the families that are in this group of people and they're gonna teach them the ways of the plan or whatever the plan is, whatever they come up with. And so they separate them into these two different houses. And then there's a third house too where most of like the adults are living. So they separate the twins and they actually separate them into two different houses. And at first it seems okay, but then it gets all messed up and twisted. They have the kids recruiting other kids, and then they have these like weird yearly games at this old abandoned amusement park where they dress them up in like monkey suits and scorpion and chameleon, and they have to take like scissors and then like go cut off a ear of the other kids' costumes or something to like, I don't know. There's a whole symbolic reasoning behind it. It's super messed up. There's certain things they do, they're really horrible that I can't really say without too much spoilers, so I'm not going to. But it's a cult. It's messed up. It messes up these kids horribly. Yeah, Jude wanted to protect her sister from all this because a lot of effed up stuff happens. So the problem is Kat, as she starts to recover, starts to get suspicious and feels like Jude is lying to her. So she slowly starts to discover and recover her past, and that leads her to not trust Jude because she doesn't understand why her twin sister, who she's thought she loved and trust, would like betray her and lie to her. And so it's a pretty crazy story. Those cults of people really messed them up, and the fact that the mother allowed all this to happen. And so Jude goes and works while Kat's at home recovering. And she's like, don't go too far from the house, this, that, and the other. And one day, well, Kat, of course, goes too far from the house. She runs into this girl that she meets whose name is apparently Nancy. And Nancy kind of like might know who she is, or maybe not. She kind of leads her along and like hints at some weird things that maybe Kat should know that she doesn't. So maybe this kind of like sparks a suspicion in her. When she asks her sister about stuff, she can tell like sometimes her sister gets all like tense and like acts like she doesn't know the person she's talking about, because she does end up mentioning this Nancy person. And so she like seems a little weird and strange about it. And then they get to the point where they're looking at all these pictures and she's like, why are there not any pictures of us? And her sister's like, oh, we don't like having our picture taken because when you look at it, it's the opposite of what we look like. So it looks like you or me, and me, I am you, or so some weird like twin explanation to it. And she's like, oh, okay. But then she's like, I want to talk to someone outside of you who knew me before, that can kind of clue me in a little bit more. And so she's like, well, there's this one lady, Wen, who we were friends with that we knew when we went over abroad to England and da 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 da, that can talk to you and kind of fill you in and whatnot. And so one day this Wen person calls and they talk on the phone and chat, and she kind of fills her in on some stuff to like about her memories and what they did while they were there and when they met her. And so she decides to ask, she's like, hey, do you by any chance have any pictures of us from that time? And she's like, yeah, of course. And she's like, do you have any pictures of like me and my sister? And she's like dreading this answer. And I was like, oh yeah, tons. And she's like, I can send them to you. So she's like, okay. And then she's like, you lied to me again about these photos. What the F? And so we go further down the rabbit hole, and this book is dark and creepy and weird and deranged, and I really highly enjoyed it. I had never heard of this author before, Abbott Kahler. They're new to me. Great book. If you like weird, deranged books that center around like a cult that's really effed up, Where You End by Abbott Kahler might just be for you. And if you like books about cults, the next video coming up will be about another book about cults. So stick around, check it out. And if you had fun hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.